the last line of 3b. 3b. 3b4, right. 3b4 motivate. So we had a dispute between Abaye and Rava. They both agree that there are two measurements of an amma. And we always take the more stringent one whenever it's relevant. If it's a longer one or a shorter one. The difference is that Abaye says that the two types of amma is one that consists of 5 tfachim and one is 6 tfachim. And Rava says no, all the amot were 6 tfachim, but the difference was between sochakot ve'atzevot, the tight and the loose.
Like happy or sad.
Right. So when you smile, your mouth is like loose. When you're angry, it's tight or sad. So Meitive, now comes a challenge to Abaye from a Braita that appears to be exactly like what Rava says. The Braita says, Kol amot she'amru, all the amma units that the sages spoke about, Chachamim, be'amma bat shisha. It's always a amma of 6 tfachim, uvilvad shelo yom chavanot, provided that they should not be exactly alike, not exactly the same tefach. We always choose the more stringent one. The loose, the tight, but it seems like exactly like Rava says. So Bishlam ale Rava, according to Rava, when the Braita says that they should not be exactly alike, it means and sometimes we take the loose ones, sometimes we take the tight ones, but they're all 6 tfachim. But according to Abaye, that's difficult because this Braita says explicitly that only 6 tfachim amma is used for all measurements. So how can Abaye explain this Braita? So Amar Lecha Abaye says, Eima, amat kil'ayim be'ama bat shisha. But the Braita means it's not referring to all cases. In the cases of the Sukkah, Mavoy, there we use the 5 tfachim amma. This Braita, when it says that always we use the 6 tfachim amma, only refers to the laws of kil'ayim. And there we said yesterday that that's the more stringent way to take the longer amma. But then the Gemara says that's impossible because the Katan is safe. At the end of the Braita, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Kol amot she'amru chachamim bechil'ayim be'ama bat shisha. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, he speaks about the kil'ayim case, and he says that there we use the 6 tfachim amma, uvilvad shelo yom mitzumtzamot, provided that they should not be precise, should not be tight. This implies that Miklal de Tana Kama, Kol Amot Kamas. When he says Kol Amot, it's not only Kil'ayim, it's all areas of Halacha. Sukkah, Mavoy, and they're all 6 tfachim according to Tana Kama. So what can Abaye say about that? Okay, so the answer is, Amar Lecha Abaye, okay, so Tana Kama I can't cope with, but Velav Mi'ika Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the Kai Kfati. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel explicitly mentions only Kil'ayim. Okay, so Ana de Amrei, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, I say like my Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. It's a Tanaic dispute. I follow the one opinion. Okay, so now Abaye Vadai Tanai. So according to Abaye, there's no doubt that this is a Tanaic dispute. Abaye cannot explain the opinion of the sages of Tanakama of this Braita according to him, to what he said, because Tanakama speaks about all amot in all cases. And Abaye says that only in the case of Kil'ayim we take the 6 tfachim amma, but not in other cases. But the question is, according to Rava, are we forced to say that it's indeed a Tanaic dispute, and Rava only holds like Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, like Tanakama? Or perhaps Rava can say that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel does not disagree with Tanakama, rather he just comes to explain Tanakama. And indeed, that's what Rava says. Amar Lecha Rava, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel does not come to disagree with Tanakama. They all agree that only 6 tefach amma is the only amma that is ever used. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, when he mentions specifically Kil'ayim, comes to just emphasize Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel atalash minan amat Kil'ayim lo yitzamtzem, that when you measure the Kil'ayim, the amot in Kil'ayim, so they should not be precise, they should be loose tefach amot, but they both agree that only 6 tefach amma is used. In other cases, it's a tight tefach because the shorter it is, the more stringent it is. But in Kilayim, the longer it is, the more stringent it is. So it's a loose tefach ama. Well, but if that's what Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel comes to say, so then why doesn't he say it explicitly? V'leima, let him say, amat kilayim lo yetzamtzem. Why does he still mention the fact that there is a 6 tefach ama? Be'ama bat shishat tefachim lemiutei mai? Is it not coming to exclude other cases where the 5 tefach ama is used? Lav lemiutei amat sukkah ve'amat mavoy, that in sukkah and mavoy, there we use the 5 tefach ama instead of the 6 tefach ama? The answer is no. In Sukkah and Mavoy, according to Rava, we only use 6 tefach ama. And indeed, this phrase of 6 tefach ama comes to exclude something, but it comes to exclude another case, the altar, the ama of the base and the ama of the ledge of the altar were a 5 tefach ama and not 6. So that's the only thing he came to exclude. Dichtiv, and that we learn from the verse in Yechezkel that says, "Ve'ele midot hamizbeach." These are the dimensions of the altar. Ba'amot, ama vatofach. Right. Allah ama v'chanas ama ze yesod. Allah chamesh v'chanas ama ze asovev. Allah shalosh, and then there's the horns of the altar. So and here this verse, the Baita expounds that it speaks about the amot of the altar, and some of them were 5 tefach ama. V'cheka ama ve'amarochav, when it says that the base shall be an ama and the width an ama, u'gvula el shfata saviv zeret ha'echad, its border to its edge all around shall be 1 span, half an ama. V'zeh gav hamizbeach, this is the top of the altar. So this verse that cheka ama zeh yesod, the base, that refers to the base of the altar. The ama rochav zeh sovev, width of an ama, this refers to the ledge. Ugvula el shfata saviv elu akranot, its border to its edge all around refers to the horns on top of the altar. V'zeh gav hamizbeach, zeh mizbach hazav, that's the golden altar. So I see that they have a diagram in footnote 14 that says that the base, only its height was a 5 tefach ama. The width of the ledge was a 5 tefach ama, and the horns were both vertically and horizontally 5 tefach ama.
Yeah, but it's interesting that in the same structure they mix
some, yeah. Kilayim, between the 5 and the 6.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a little confusing. I mean,
Yeah, but okay, whatever. That's the thing that this Baita comes to exclude. But according to Rava, in all other cases of Sukkah, Mavoy, and Kilayim, it's only 6 tefach ama. Okay, now comes a statement that says, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashi, Amar Rav, says that 3 things are Halacha leMoshe miSinai. There's no source in the Torah for them. It's an oral tradition that Moses received at Sinai and transferred to us. Shiurin, Chatzitzin, Umechitzin. The standards of measures in halacha, interpositions in immersion, and partitions, the laws of partitions, halacha leMoshe miSinai. And now the Gemara speaks about all 3 of them and inquires, why do you say that it's halacha leMoshe miSinai? Apparently we have an explicit source in the Torah. Anything that is explicitly mentioned in the Torah cannot be considered halacha leMoshe miSinai. Halacha leMoshe miSinai is something that is an oral tradition without a source in the written Torah. Like the black tefillin, the black straps. That's halacha leMoshe miSinai. There's no clue in the Torah that it must be black. No, so there's halacha leMoshe miSinai that the straps must be black. Yeah, so it's like the oraita. Shin shel tefillin, to make a knot, to write the shin on the tefillin shel rosh. Halacha leMoshe miSinai. There's no verse in the Torah that says that, but it's an oral. Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu received it at Sinai. And
We're not allowed to change it.
yeah, of course, that's
We have to take black.
black is out. No, the straps must be black. And also another characteristic of Halakha Moshe Sinai is that there's never a dispute in that. It's unanimous. Always Halakha Moshe Sinai is unanimous. No dispute.
It makes life easier.
Yeah. And now the question is, Shiurin, you say that the laws governing measures, that's Halakha Moshe Sinai? Deoraita. We expound it from a verse in the Torah itself, from the 7 species. תכתיב ארץ חיטה ושעורה וגפן וטעינה ורימון, etc. ואמר רב חנן, כל הפסוק הזה, this entire verse, לשיעורין אינה, was only said for the purpose of teaching the laws of measures. The Torah did not need to specify the different produce of Eretz Israel. It just specifies these produce to tell us about different measures, and now he explains. Chita, what do we learn from wheat? What is there the measure of wheat? Lichedetnan, for what the Mishnah says in Masechet Negaim. Hanichnas levaita menuga, if one enters a tzarat afflicted house. So a person or anything that enters such a house becomes tameh immediately. But the garments, the things that a person wear, do not become tameh immediately. It takes a while for them to become tameh. That is expounded from a verse. So if a person enters, b'chilav al ktefav, if his garments are carried on his shoulders, v'sandalav v'tabutav v'yadav, and his shoes and rings are carried in his hands, so to all these items we apply the verse that whatever enters the house becomes tameh immediately. Hu v'hem tmeim miyad, both he and them become tameh immediately. But in case he was wearing these things, hayal lavush keilav, if he was wearing his garments, v'sandalav beraglav, and his shoes were on his feet, v'tabutav v'etzbeotav, and his rings were on his fingers. In this case, he himself, who tameh miyad, he's tameh immediately. But the things that he wears, v'en teorin, remain tahor, ad sheishhe bichdei achilat pras, for the duration of the time it takes to eat a half loaf.
But those things are touching it. They should be considered rishon.
Yeah, but biblically, utensils do not become. He's avatumah. Why should they not be tameh? Because they touch him.
Exactly. So they're not avatuma because he's wearing them, he's not carrying them. But if he's touching them, they should get something.
Right. So then they could become rishon, but for them to become also avatumah, so it's when they stay there for that duration of
From Rishon LeGra, things like
teorim. Right. It says teorim. So I think, if I remember well, there's indeed a dispute about this. One opinion is that teorim is relative to avatumah. They're teorim, but they do become rishon letumah. I think that's the more acceptable opinion. That teorim is relative; they're not yet avatumah. No, it's just a clue. Right. Right. It doesn't tell you what the measurement is, but it's there's at least a source in the Torah itself for these different, some hint, some clue. So that's why it cannot be considered Halakha Moshe Sinai, because Halakha Moshe Sinai has no clue in the Torah. And this is the wheat, because the time it takes to eat half a loaf is half a loaf of patchitin, wheat bread, velo patchorin, not barley bread. One can eat wheat bread faster than barley bread. It takes a longer time to eat barley bread than wheat bread. And also, it should be the fastest possible, and therefore, meisev ve'ochel beleftan, he must be reclining and eating the bread together with a relish.
that takes more time.
No, it's faster because right. If it's dry bread, it takes a longer time to eat dry bread than if you dip it. Right.
But he's sitting down, he's not standing.
Must be reclining. Then also eats faster because if you
If you're standing, it takes longer.
takes longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing. It's not explicit, but at least there's a there's a hint in the Torah to a measure. Yeah, and also other things. Seorah. What's the measurement of seorah? Measure of seorah? Detnan. The Mishnah says, etzem keseorah, human bone, the size of a barley kernel, metameh b'magav masak, contaminates. through contact, through carrying. Ve'inam metameh be'ol does not contaminate through being under the same roof. Gefen, it's also a measure, halachic measure. Kedei revi'it yain lenazir, the amount of revi'it of wine that an nazir incurs lashes for drinking that. Also a halachic measure that is derived from this verse. Te'ena, that's a fig. So that's a kigrogeret, lotzat Shabbat. That's the size of a dried fig, which is the minimum amount of food for which one is liable for carrying on Shabbat, from domain to domain. Rimon, pomegranate, keditnan. This is also another halachic measure. In case of wooden utensils of a homeowner, if there is a hole the size of a pomegranate, it's considered useless. If the hole is smaller, then it's still usable. Kedetan, as the Mishnah says, Kol klei ba'alei batim, all homeowners' utensils, shiuran kerimanim, the measure of the hole in them is the size of a pomegranate, which the utensil, can you say the utensil? No. It's the disqualifies them, like de-utilize.
Where's all?
Okay. Eretz Zayt Shemen. Right, those are the status. Like to de-utilize. Yeah. And then when it says Eretz Zayt Shemen in olive, that's Eretz Shekol Shurei Kol Zitim. Every legal measure is the size of an olive. Always. Like one who eats chelev, one who consumes blood, notar, pigul, tameh, to eat a carcass, non-kosher animal. Oh, so that's the next question. You say that all the measurements are all in olive, but there are those measures that we just mentioned, which are not the volume of an olive. Okay, so say most, majority of its legal measures are the size of an olive. Beitza is related to an olive? I think it says that beitza is 2 olives. Right, so it also depends on the olive size. Right. And then dvash, finally the last thing is date honey. And there's also a halachic measure that we measure in dates. One who eats on Yom Kippur is not liable unless he ate the volume of a date, a large date.
What about eating at intervals?
Eating what?
You eat less than the volume, you wait half an hour.
So then there's no biblical liability. That's why sick people. Yeah, that's why when sick people need to eat on Yom Kippur, they eat less than that every 10 minutes. Well, so the question is, how can you say that the shiurin, the measures, halachic measures, are alachal Moshe Sinai? We just expounded it from a verse in the Torah itself. The answer is, you really think that shiurin michtav ktiveh, that these measures are considered to be written in the Torah? How? Of course not. The verse comes to just mention the 7 species of Eretz Israel. It doesn't talk about measures. Ela, rather, the laws of measures is alachal Moshe Sinai. It's an oral tradition, and this exposition is just an allusion. Yeah, the sages supported it with this verse, but it's not the source. And then they also mentioned chatzitzin, the laws of interpositions in immersions is also alachal Moshe Sinai. And the question is, why do you say it's alachal Moshe Sinai? Deoraita ninu, chatzitzin deoraita. It's a biblical concept. Dichtiv verachatz et kol besaro b'mayim. Actually, the verse says verachatz b'mayim et kol besaro. He shall bathe his entire body in the water, and this is to say that nothing should interpose between his flesh and the water. So that we expound on the verse in the Torah itself. It's not alachal Moshe Sinai. But when it talks about the water, b'mei mikveh, that's mikveh water, kol besaro, all his flesh, mayim shekol gufo ole b'hen. The water should be sufficient for his entire body to enter at one time. Oh, the interposition? So soon the Gemara speaks about that. But the concept that interposition is a problem is written in the Torah itself. So how can you say it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai? V'chamayin, how much water is enough for the entire body to be dipped in? Amma al amma berum shalosh amot. It's amma by the height of 3 amot.
Depends on the size of the tank.
3 cubic amot of water. Then no, when the person goes in, the water goes up, so it will ultimately cover the entire body. Yeah, amma by amma, height of 3 amot. When you go in, it covers an average person. I mean, Og Melech HaBashan would need maybe more water, but
The idea, I guess, is to make sure the whole body is
right.
covered.
Right. So the Shi'aruch Rabin, the sages measured or estimated Shi'aruch. May mikveh 40 se'ah, 40 se'ah. That's enough for an entire body. So why do we need halacha l'Moshe Sinai? The concept of interposition is expounded from the verse. The answer is the oral tradition is needed l'se'aro, that even in one's hair there's a problem of interposition. If a single knotted hair, if the one strand of hair is knotted, that's a problem, interposition, because the water cannot go through the knot, and it's a problem. If 3 hairs are knotted together, there's no problem, because since hair is not a material that could be very tight with one another, so if 3 hairs are knotted together, there's always room for water to go in between. So there's 3 or more. If there are 2 hairs knotted together, this I do not know if there's a problem. So the concept of interposition in the hair is not mentioned in the Torah, and for that we need halacha l'Moshe Sinai. No, but in one hair, knotted, if there's a knot in one hair, that's a problem. And not just a knot, anything that if there are lice on the hair, also it interposes. Yeah. But the question is, this concept too is written in the Torah itself. The Tanya, as the Braita expounds, et kol basaro b'mayim. So when the Torah says et kol basaro, the word et comes to include et hatafel b'saro, that which is auxiliary to his skin. V'zeu se'ah, that's the hair. So this also is written in the Torah itself. Why do we need the halacha l'Moshe Sinai oral tradition? The answer is that the oral tradition is needed for a specific detail of the laws of interposition. To the law of the major part and the minor part, the law of objection and non-objection, and that is Rabbi Yitzchak. The Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Dvar Torah, the biblical law, and this biblical law is not written in the Torah itself, it's just an oral tradition. The interposition is only a problem in case it covers the majority of the body, or of a utensil if you want to immerse a utensil, and also umakpid alav. It's such an interposition to which one objects. Chotzetz, that interposes. But if one of these 2 conditions is not fulfilled, either it does not cover the majority of the body, or it's something which one does not object, so then biblically there's no problem of interposition. If it's such a thing to which one does not object, no problem. No, biblically there's no problem. But the sages decreed, v'gazru al rubo she'eino makpid, they decreed that interpositions covering the major part, even though one does not object to them, it's still a problem. And mishum rubo makpid, on account of an interposition covering the majority to which one objects. And also val miuto makpid, they also decreed that even if the interposition is on the minor part of the body, but if it's something to which one objects, so then it's a problem, mishum ruba makpid, on account of the majority to which one objects. So this halacha is an oral tradition that these 2 conditions. What if?
You said it's interposition on the majority of the body.
It means the majority of the body. whatever you want to immerse. If you immerse the body of a person or a utensil, so the biblical law is that there's no problem of interposition unless the interposition interposes between the water and the major part of either the body or the utensil.
So a tiny little area.
Not biblically, it's not a problem, but rabbinically, if it's something to which one objects, so then it's a problem.
Object. What do you mean object? You mean
Object means that most people are particular and would
take it away.
right.
So could you go to make the half your body and then upside down and do that last thing?
No. A person, in case of a person, it must be the entire person at once.
Same thing with key.
Right, the same thing with the kli, utensil also. In kashering a utensil, you can do it half-half. When you kasher a utensil in fire or in, so then you can, if it's impossible to do it at once, you can do it half-half. But in immersion, it must be all at once.
But if something is covering a utensil, and you would say rabbinically, there's no point because it's still thin. But because you say differently, it would be possible to do it. So it's better to do it directly, not with it.
No, I think the sages invalidated such a thing. So it's an invalid immersion. It's true that invalidation is a rabbinic decree, but it's still invalid. And now there's a question for Saul. The question is, why did the sages only decree that there's interposition only in case one of the conditions is fulfilled? Let them also decree, let them decree in case of an interposition that covers just a minor part, and also one does not object to it, on account of the other two cases. Mishum miuto amakpid, on account of a case where it covers the minor part to which one objects, inami mishum or on account of one that covers the majority to which he does not object. Well, what we say so far is that the biblical problem of interposition is only in a case where the interposition fulfills two conditions. It covers the major part of the body or the utensil, and also it is something to which one objects. The sages decreed in case one condition is fulfilled, either if it covers the majority of the major part, or it's something to which one objects. But they did not decree in case where it only covers the minor part to which one does not object. So the question is, why didn't they also decree on that on account of the other two cases? The answer is that higuf gzera, that itself is an invalid immersion only by force of a rabbinic decree. So you want to add a secondary decree? So there's no secondary decree.
All would be happy.
Right. So this explains the case of interposition. Why do we need an oral tradition? And now, mechitzot. You also mentioned partitions. That the laws governing partitions, halacha leMoshe Sinai, how come? Mechitzot deoraita ninu. That's a biblical law. We have a biblical source in Masechet Sukkah. The Gemara expounds, the Amar Mar, Aron Tisha, the height of the Holy Ark was 9 tfachim, because the Torah says it's Amma v'chetzi komato, 1.5 Amma. Amma is 6 tfachim, plus 3, that's 9 tfachim. V'chaporet, the lid covering the ark, its thickness was also 1 tefach. So 9 plus 1, areikan asara, 10 tfachim. And from here we learn that's a partition. Because Hashem spoke to Moses from the top of the ark, which was above 10 tfachim. And here we learn that it's like a different domain, above 10 tfachim. So that's a source, that a partition should be at least 10 tfachim. It's a biblical source. So why did he say that it's halacha leMoshe Sinai? We have a biblical source. The answer is that the halacha leMoshe Sinai is needed according to an opinion that this cannot be the source. Lo tzricha ela leRabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda de Amar, amat binyan be'amah bat shisha. He says that the amma units used for the structure of the Mishkan were indeed 6 tefach amma, but amat keilim, the amma units that were used for the vessels, be'amah bat chamisha. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the height of the ark, which was 1.5 amma, was not 9 tfachim, it was just 7.5 tfachim. If the amma was 5 plus 2.5, that's 7.5, plus 1 tefach of the lid, it's just 8.5. 8.5. So that's not the source that a partition is 10 tefachim, obviously. So he needs Halakha Moshe Sinai to teach that the height of a partition, a valid partition, is 10 tefachim. In some synagogues in the US, they use it. That's the partition between the men and the women. 10 tefachim. Yeah. Ule Rabbi Meir, and according to Rabbi Meir, the Amar Kol Ha'amot ayu beveinonit ma'ikal ha'memer. So according to Rabbi Meir, who says that the ark was indeed 9 tefachim high, plus the lid, it was 10 tefachim, so that is a source for the height of the partition. So why, according to him, do we need an oral tradition for the laws of partitions? The answer is, according to him, Rabbi Meir, the oral tradition is needed for other laws that apply to partitions, legud, good asik, good achi, to extend it upwards or downwards, ulelavud, veledofen akuma, bent wall in a sukkah, which we mentioned yesterday. So these are all just halakha Moshe Sinai. There's no clue in the Torah for these laws. And then we talk about a case of a crossbeam that was above 20 amot, haya gavoa me-20 amot, was higher than 20 amot. The Mishnah says you must decrease the gap between the crossbeam and the floor. If one comes to reduce its height, and now we talk about a case where he wants to reduce it from the bottom. He wants to, let's say the crossbeam is, let's say it's 20 amot plus 2 tefachim. So he has to make like a 2 tefachim step. So the question is, how much must he reduce? How high must the ground be built up? And this is obvious. As much as it needs to just make the level of the ground exactly 20 amot from the bottom of the crossbeam. Rather, the question is not about the height, the question is about the width. How much must its width be? How deep into the mavoi must this step extend? That's the question. So that was a dispute between Rav Yosef and Abaye. Rav Yosef amar tefach, just 1 tefach, a platform 1 tefach deep, which is equal to the depth of the crossbeam, the korah. That should be directly under the crossbeam, 1 tefach deep, and the height is as much as necessary. The Abaye amar arba. Abaye says no, it must extend 4 tefachim deep into the mavoi, beyond the crossbeam, the width of the crossbeam. So the question is, what's their point of dispute? What is it that they argue about? So the Gemara suggests that perhaps they argue about Leima be'aka miflagei. The man amar tefach, Rav Yosef, who says that the raised area must only be just 1 tefach deep, maybe he holds that mutar lishtamesh tachat hakorah, one is permitted to carry directly under the korah. And this is actually a dispute later in the Gemara later. And that is that the outer edge of the korah is viewed as a partition which extends downward and seals off the entranceway. So the ground beneath the korah is within the enclosure, and one may carry there like in the rest of the mavoi, the alleyway. And therefore, according to him, you can be standing right under the crossbeam and carrying it there. So therefore, it's a sufficient sign. I mean, the purpose of the korah is to be a heker, noticeable. If you stand on the ground beyond that platform, you cannot notice the crossbeam because it's more than 20 amot above the ground. But if you stand right and under the crossbeam, there's just 1 tefach there. See, you can notice it, and that's enough. You can notice. That's only what you need to notice is actually the outer edge of the korah, which is the one that virtually goes down and closes off the entranceway. That's what Rav Yosef holds. And maybe Abaye, who said that it must extend 4 tefachim into the alleyway, Abaye holds that it's prohibited to carry directly under the korah because, according to him, the inner edge of the korah is considered to have partitioned the mavoi. So if that platform would just be 1 tefach, just corresponding to the Korah itself, if you stand on it, it's as if you're standing outside the Mavoy. You cannot carry there. The Korah must be noticeable for those who are permitted to carry things. And for that, you must be standing within the inner edge of the Korah. And for that, you need a platform there to be standing on and to be noticing the Korah. So since it cannot be just exactly one tefach, says Abai, okay, so extend it to 4 tefachim. Make it 4 tefachim, like an important place.
Make it for it from him a person can stand.
Yeah, there, there. Anything from the inner edge of the Korah you can carry, and there you can even stand on that platform and notice the Korah, because the Korah will be no more than 20 amot above the ground level. So that's the suggestion, but I suggest we continue tomorrow because it's not the long daf tomorrow also. So. Pleasure. It's like a step.